all across the fantasy universe. Welcome, boys and girls, to the 2 Point Stance. I'm your boy, Brian Drake. Follow me on Twitter at Fantasy, hanging with my main man, Joe Dolan. He is at FG_Dolan, the managing editor of fantasypoints.com, the good folks who power the engine that is the 2 Point Stance. Joe, what's going on, my friend? How are things down there in South Carolina?
Well, Drake, the weather was warm and toasty today as I'm about 2 hours down the road, or up the road, I guess one would say, from Augusta, Georgia. So if you were watching the Masters, you saw that the temperatures, Tiger was sweating like Patrick Ewing out there, which I can sympathize. I never use the right one, sympathize or empathize, but whichever one it means, I know what that feels like because let's put it this way. I try to wear a dark shirt when I golf in the summer here in South Carolina. So the weather's warm. It is going to be a disaster tomorrow. The Masters is going to be a washout either tomorrow or Saturday. I'm supposed to play tomorrow. It ain't going to happen. So that's what's going on down here. Been hanging out with the Fantasy Points crew, just kind of getting things set up for the 2023 season. It's been great, really rewarding, and looking forward to talking to you guys tonight.
Yeah, so we're going to talk Dynasty fantasy football today. And I brought on one of the best, if not the best guy I know. And the reason, Joe, that I know he's perfect for this is because he lives in a place that you will never sweat through your shirt, because he lives where I live here in Syracuse, New York. It's our good friend, Jordan McNamara. You follow him on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. He runs the analytics of dynasty.com. You also see him at footballguys.com. He does a great job writing articles and rankings over there. Does a kick-ass Dynasty show with Chad Parsons. I recommend you guys check that out. Jordan, welcome to the 2 Point Stance.
Yeah, sweating during like the Masters isn't something that typically is a problem that I face, but I'm glad you guys I'm glad you guys have it down there, Joe. Brian and I have the cold covered up here, but thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Well, you guys said I can play golf year round here. True, but that requires you to play golf in July, August, and September down here, which is not pleasant. Trust me. We can talk about that at another time, but it is not.
I'll trade your June, July, August for our December, January, and February.
Not take. You got to throw in a couple firsts on that one, Jordan.
I just threw in
way into the future.
Yeah, just threw in a new driver for myself, so you guys will see me on the old Twitter machine hitting my new ping driver. So. Well, it's Dynasty season. I'm excited because I have several Dynasty drafts coming up, and Dynasty is just gaining so much steam in the fantasy community. So we figured, let's get Jordan on. It's going to be really what everyone's talking about now is their rookie picks start coming due. And let's start there, Jordan. Bijan Robinson, he's the jewel of this rookie class. We all know that he's likely going to be the 101 in basically any rookie draft that happens between now and forever. So let's put Bijan aside. I want to ask you, who else should these drafters be excited about? And not everyone's going to have the 101, so you got to pick somebody else. Who else should guys be getting excited for? Who should they be targeting? Who's someone maybe that isn't getting talked about that should be a first-round pick in most Dynasty rookie drafts?
Yeah, so this is an interesting time of the year. And before the draft, the most important thing you can know about a player is when they go in the NFL draft. So, as we're sitting here before the draft, I try and be very careful about making a firm decision on a player until I know when they go, right? Because if the player is an early second-round pick, that's vastly different than if they're a fourth-round pick, right? There's a big difference there because what ends up being very, very important is players' draft pedigree. So I'm sort of watching for all that stuff and paying attention. And then I try to play a lot of different profiles, right? So again, if there's 4, 5, 6 first-round wide receivers, I tend to treat them largely similar and try and nab, one of the cheaper ones instead of moving up for one of the more aggressive ones. So I'm very price sensitive, I guess would be the answer to that question on the specific profiles that I'm going to use. But I mean, I think quarterback, especially in Superflex Dynasty, is going to be really interesting. And there's probably 2 players that I'm the most interested in where they go in the NFL draft, because I think it'll have a big impact. Where Will Levis goes, right? If he goes the way of like Malik Willis last year, where he falls to, outside the top 50, when people were mocking him at 2, right? That would be a notable, right? I don't think that's going to happen, but that, he seems to be following And what happens with Anthony Richardson, right? I mean, there's a firm position, I think, in the draft markets and Dynasty that he's going to be a top 3 pick, right? He's the favorite to go 3 right now. Let's see that. You know what I mean? Let's see someone make a move there. No one's moved there yet. And, that's I'm very curious to see how that all pans out. I think those are the 2 biggest things that I'm curious about in Superflex formats.
Well, let's circle back to Bijan Robinson because, like I said, he's likely going to be the 101 in every draft. Is there a scenario in your mind, Jordan, where he wouldn't be the 101? And again, most people don't like taking running backs in that spot. Dynasty tends to be very wide receiver heavy because of the short shelf life of these running backs. So let's just get your Bijan thoughts. And can he not be the 101?
Yeah, I was having a discussion with a couple subscribers today, and I was, we were just kicking around like, what would it take for him not to be 101? And it would have to be a bad landing spot. I mean, I don't even know what that would be, right? I've seen Detroit speculated, right? Because it'd be crowded. I don't think they're going to take him, so I don't think that's super realistic. But I mean, maybe if something like it'd have to be something odd that happened like that, where he becomes sort of in a weird work share, I think, but I don't think they're going to be in the market for that. And then it would have to be somebody else that comes and takes it. And again, it's going to require you to do quarterback. Again, it'd just probably be Anthony Richardson, but I don't know. I don't see the position there that I'd want to do that with. You know what I mean? I guess maybe Anthony Richardson to Vegas would be like the best shot at that happening. But again, I think I'm really stretching to find a scenario where it wouldn't be Bijan Robinson number 1.
And that the other thing that makes me wonder that with that question is let's say you had the 1-1 and you feel good about your running backs, but why wouldn't you just trade the 1-1 then, right? And let somebody else come up and get Bijan Robinson at 1-1. See if you could pick up an extra pick or 2 for that trade. So maybe the team that holds the 1-1 doesn't necessarily want Bijan, but somebody else will, and you can maybe leverage that pick as well. And I think that's a good point you make, Jordan, about this quarterback class and why Bijan Robinson probably is 1-1 in Superflex anyway, is because it's a strangely landing spot dependent because, I actually think Carolina is a pretty good landing spot. I know they traded DJ Moore, but the offensive line is good. I think they're building that team the right way. But let's say they take CJ Stroud. Are we really getting excited for CJ Stroud in with the style of player he is in this day and age in fantasy? Not to say he can't move, more than he showed in college. It's a really strange year for quarterbacks, even in Superflex Dynasty. I feel, even though it's a pretty good quarterback class, it's just a weird confluence of circumstances here.
I think I found the combination as you were talking, right? And as you sort of said what you said, I think if Anthony Richardson went 1 and the Patriots drafted Bijan Robinson, right, I think there'd be some movement towards other people going another way at 1. I think what you said is interesting. Just yesterday, I'm stuck at quarterback in my quarterback 2 position, and I'll spare you the specific details, but I'm trying to get another elite quarterback, and I couldn't do it. So in a kind of a 2-part trade, I traded Saquon Barkley for a couple firsts, and then I used one of the firsts to move from 102 to 101. And so I said, now I got the 101, and can I put that in a deal that gets me an elite quarterback, different than the 102 would have been, different than, a later first round pick would have been? Can I use that chip, plus maybe another piece to get me an actual elite quarterback to solve my problem? Right. I think before I'm trading down, before I'm trading, across positions, before I'm like, ooh, this is a deep class, I'll move to 2 and I'll take a later first and that type of trade it for an elite piece, right? Trade it for an elite player would be my thought. And even if you have to add to it before you trade down, trade up with that pick would be my thought.
You and Chad on your show for Football Guys recently did a show about valuing picks versus players. So I want to talk about valuing picks versus established assets, because I always think people maybe value the unknown of some of these rookie draft picks more than they value the solid commodity that is a player. Like, we know the role of Devonta Smith, for instance, the wide receiver for the Eagles. We know what he is. We know his quarterback situation. We know kind of what he's going to be year in and year out. But if someone would say I'd rather have this unknown maybe first round pick than having the value of Davante. What do you say to people out there who they're always trying to chase that what if? They're chasing that ghost of the draft pick, and then eventually you have to make this pick. You know, you can't just have picks forever. Would you rather have the pick, or do you like kind of fill in your roster? Like, give me Devonta Smith. Give me the guy I know can produce.
Yeah, I mean, I usually ask people, what are you trying to accomplish? Right. And for me, I'm trying to accomplish scoring a lot of points. I think a lot of people play Dynasty for other reasons than that. They play because they like to draft. They play because they like to trade. You know, they like to develop long-term assets and all that stuff. I just want to win. So like that, sometimes people you should be talking across each other because you'll be like, I don't understand why you're trying to, keep kicking out your picks, right? What's your aim for that? Well, I can draft someone 2 years from now. Well, good. That's nice, but what does that accomplish in the meantime? You know what I mean?
Someone's got to win the league this year.
Yeah, right. And that was the conversation a little bit around the Bijan Robinson thing was like, wouldn't you rather take a quarterback at 2? And I was like, I got to wait 2 years for them to really make a difference. I can have Bijan Robinson this year, for the next 2 years, and I can worry about 5 years from now when it gets here. So I think it's a question of like, what are you trying to accomplish? A lot of times with that, there's a moving. Right. It's a moving barometer, right? How much, if I can get an elite player with a pick that's not an elite pick, I'm all in, right? Like that's good. I always think about picks is like, what's the best use of them? A lot of times it isn't picking with them. A lot of times it's in a trade for an elite player. If you can get an elite player, what I call I usually think of like players in the top 30, right? If I want to get as many of those guys as I can. How do I get them, right? If it includes trading picks, I'll do it. If it includes drafting them, I'll do it. That's what I'm trying to do, get as many of those guys as I can. If I can get 4 or 5 of them, my team's probably going to be pretty dominant, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. I think, as you go down, right, I think an easy way to think about it, especially at wide receiver, when you compare sort of incoming guys who have not produced, right? So just take let's say you get a receiver, a rookie coming in this year, and he's got a 3rd round startup ADP. If you compare him to veterans, okay, if you compare him to veterans in the 7th round, right, a 7th round guy who is hit in his career, who has a top 24 seasonal finish on his resume, they match in terms of what you would expect for them over the next 3 and 4 years. Okay, so basically, what you're doing when you do that is you are getting when those young wide receivers go up there, you're paying a 4-round tax because they're young. Right. You are paying a 4-round tax a lot of times at wide receiver when you compare them to their production. And right, I always think like that's a rich person's problem, right? That is a rich team problem. You do that when you have nothing else to do with your assets, right? It's like investing in very fancy chandelier in your house. If I don't have a roof, it doesn't do me any good, right? It's only something you can do when you have a lot of assets, when we have surplus. So I'm always got to be careful about that because I think that people get really locked in on, hey, I want to have young, insulated wide receivers, and they do it at the expense of production. And like, I think that's a classic trap. So you got to be really careful. And that's why I think a lot of times trading your, outside the top 10 picks, right? 2nd round guys, when you can fill a starting roster spot with one of those picks, it's probably worth it in a trade.
I have a great dynasty story, which will lead into a question. So this league that I've been very, very competitive in, I've won it in the past. I had Tom Brady as one of my quarterbacks. And when Tom Brady retired, I released him. Well, we all know what happened. Tom Brady ended up coming back.
Retirement?
Yeah. So he ended up coming back this past season. I had, through a series of trades, the 102. So I'm sitting here thinking, damn it. I'm like, of course I threw the message board. Anyway, I can get Tom Brady back. Like, we didn't realize this was going to happen, and be like, F you, Drake. You're out of it. No, you can't get Tom Brady back. That's all right. I still got Jalen Hurts. So anyways, I always like scouring the teams in the league, and I'm a running back hoarder. I always want running backs. And I was just waiting. All right, well, we'll see what happens here. You can draft anybody in these drafts. It's free agents or rookies. The guy at the 101, his team was so destitute. He had Ryan Fitzpatrick as his only quarterback. He took Tom Brady at the 101, and Breece Hall fell to me. I did naked cartwheels down the highway. It was unfreaking believable. But it leads me to this question. Like I said, I look around a lot of dynasty teams, Jordan, and running back, because everyone's so wide receiver, drunk at this point. There's a lot of teams that don't have crap for running back in Dynasty. So if you can really bank some of these assets, I mean, you're just head and shoulders above some of these other teams. I look at Dynasty in like a 2-year window. That's it. Because some of these guys can be gone, dead, donezo. You know what's going to happen in 2 years. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on, the running back versus wide receiver? I got to have 8 million, second year wideouts versus just give me a damn running back that can actually get touches and score touchdowns.
I love it. Right. And I think people look like outside the top 5 rounds of a startup draft, right? Top 5 players in your dynasty roster, people play way too long-term, right? Because then what happens is like, it becomes outside of 2 years, it's really difficult to predict these guys, especially when you get outside that range, because the hit rates they fall off, right? The odds of players producing and making a meaningful difference becomes very low as you get going along, and it becomes very low of them doing it multiple times. I mean, you're looking and you get really quickly into the single digits of chances for guys to hit multiple times. And so you start thinking about that and you're like, okay, why am I investing in, you look at like orphans, right? They end up becoming so bogged down with wide receivers that are round 3 guys, right? And it's funny this time of year, like it's the trade baits are typically people putting wide receivers on the trade bait to try and trade them that were picked a couple years ago, and they were round 3 or beyond rookies, right, who have done nothing, or they're orphan teams who have taken over and are doing the same thing, right? Like those, it's the most common trade bait at this time of year because people bog their roster down. So I'm with you. Like, and again, the level of success for a running back is a lot lower than a wide receiver, right? Like just think about Samaje Perine last year, right? Samaje Perine in a couple of games when Mixon's out crushes. I mean, my analytics at Dynasty logo is Latavius Murray's 2019 season. Right? There was a 2-game stretch. It was week 7 and 8 of that year where Alvin Kamara was out, and Latavius Murray was the running back 1, not a running back 1, the running back 1 by about 9 points. Right. And you look at that stretch, and that's a dominant stretch, right? A 2-game, it was north of 30 points, and you're probably 1-1, if not 2-0. Now, it's not as sexy as rostering 17 wide receivers, but it is a much more productive way to do it because you get those upticks, right? You just need, if you're looking at your roster, you need your running backs to just sort of fill those spots in for you, and you can crush it, and especially in the flex, right? I think people way over flex wide receivers, thinking, oh, they're going to be safe floor guys. A, they're usually not, and B, you're giving up a ton of ceiling because on a week-to-week basis, which fantasy is, it's a lineup setting game when you're playing in a form, and when you're not playing best ball, it's a huge advantage to have running backs because those good things can happen to them, and you can't predict them at wide receiver.
Latavius Murray, quick note for everybody out there, grew up where? The suburbs of Syracuse, New York.
Yes.
So
I ride my bike by his school, by the way. I ride my bike by his school pretty frequently, so I always, I gotta pay homage to the logo.
Where did he go? Did he go to Central Florida?
Yes.
Yes.
Is that where he went to school? Yeah, I remember. I remember when he came out because he was big, straight line, explosive. I don't think you consider Latavius Murray explosive anymore, but I guess when you start explosive, you have more room to decline before you become completely washed. That's a guy who's hung around for a while at this point. I did not know he was from Syracuse.
You can see the Carrier Dome, now the JMA Wireless Dome, literally like from the town that he went to high school in. Right. Absolutely. It's the dome sits up on a big hill, and we couldn't get him to come play football here. That's the story of Syracuse football, but it is what it is. Let me run this by you real quick too. You'd mentioned orphan teams, Jordan. Mm-hmm. What is some advice for folks who are getting in right now? We see it all over the place. Joe mentioned in the pre-show, there's some high stakes offerings out there where you can get in on an orphan team for cheap, and people are always trying to fill their league. Please, God, I'll pay half your entry fee. Just take over this orphan team. Then you look at the roster and you're like, my God, I know why this guy bailed on this team. What's your advice for someone who's going to come in and take a team? Like, should you really try to rework it all in 1 year? Is it a long process? Like, should you trade everybody? What are your thoughts?
I try to never give away a year. So I always try and be in it, especially now. Like we could go through a list of things that, and if we had gone back a year, I could tell you a list of things that would happen in the season where you wouldn't believe me at all. Right. And
yeah, a guy's going to
so,
die on the field. And then
right,
we're going to cancel a game and people are going to win championships
right,
because that game didn't finish. No,
right.
why would we
Yes.
ever think that happens?
And that was like a monumental one, but that happens like in the crazy stuff like that happens every week with like less fatal consequences, right? Like less dire. But on it for impacting fantasy, all types of things happen. I mean, don't forget Derrick Henry sat that week. You know what I mean? Jalen Hurts, who would have been the quarterback one had he played it out, didn't play in the championship week.
Mm-hmm.
So crazy stuff happens. And so I would say, like, and again, that doesn't even include like injuries that happen preseason. I mean, I was just looking at like a 2-week stretch there. So much crazy stuff happens during the season. I think you have to be open to trying contending now, right? If you're in a really bad situation where it's an orphan and you think there's no chance, right? Literally no chance. Then, can you kick out stuff? Can you do, can you get more flexible with your roster, do those types of things? I understand that. Make sure you have proper roster construction. Again, kind of what we were just talking about, right? There's a big value in you can turn around your team by a couple of wins just by having better roster construction, right? Just by getting rid of the guys that cannot help you for guys that could help you. And if their circumstances turn right, a lot of those guys that can't help you will be day 3 developmental wide receivers, the guys that can help you, depth running backs. And they become kind of fungible throughout the season. So constantly sort of be optimizing your roster. If you got 3 or 4 guys that are in the top, 30 or 40 of dynasty rankings of ADP, like you should be competing. Right. And so I think a lot of times people want to tear it down by trading those guys when in reality, if you try and package a couple of depth players, right? People always want more depth. If you try and package depth players from meaningful assets, like you can really turn your team around quicker than I think than a lot of people give credit for.
Talking with our guy, Jordan McNamara, analytics of dynasty.com, footballguys.com. Does a great job over at Football Guys with our guy, Chad Parsons, doing the Dynasty show. How long have you guys been doing that now?
We're 56 episodes in. So we started like this time, I think we started a week before the draft in 2021, I think.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Follow him on Twitter.
Lasting that long these days, it's
yeah.
good stuff.
And now you put me to the 10. I'm trying to count now. 2021, 2020. Yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was now. Maybe it was 2020. It might have been 2020. It might have been 2020.
I feel like you would remember if it was 2020 though, because that was during COVID.
Yeah, I can't remember. That was right around the time.
The 2020 draft was so surreal because it was Roger Goodell in his basement. But like that was when like I remember like all this got, I don't want to bring this all up, but remember the discussions like how dare the NFL do this draft and like like with what's going on, and then like it was one of the most compelling NFL drafts ever, just because we were all so starved for like sports content and something, and like by like day 2 of the draft, it actually kind of felt normal that Goodell was in his basement and like we're just sitting here waiting. All these trades are going on. I do not want to go back to 2020, but like I do remember like the feeling of normalcy that gave us. That was much needed at that time because we were only like 6 weeks into the pandemic at that point.
100%. It was wild. It was a wild time. Yeah, it was 2021 that we It was 2020 that we started that show. Yeah, I just went back and I checked. It was like April of 2020. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty. It's funny how far we've come with that. I just remember him sitting in his chair, like that chair that was there.
The chair was at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I think they raffled it at some point too, or some crazy thing. Like, yeah, it's funny, but it's just we've come so far from that time.
Well, if you guys are sitting at your house and you're getting antsy for football, like, we were in 2020, how about you head over to Underdog Fantasy, use our promo code FANTASYPTS. We're going to match your first time deposit up to $100. Oh, guess what? That's not all. You use that promo code FANTASYPTS. We're going to throw in a $5 subscription to fantasypoints.com. It is legit the best deal in the business. Go over there right now. Underdog Fantasy, FANTASYPTS is the code. Take our money. take our subscription. Please come hang out with us at fantasypoints.com. All right, I want to dive into something, gentlemen, that set the Twitter world on fire. My good friend Nathan Yankee from Pro Football Focus, I have done numerous radio shows with him. He is the sweetest man in America. He put out his Dynasty quarterback rankings, and the team at PFF made a graphic of it, and people went bananas. Nathan had Jalen Hurts at number 1, Josh Allen at number 2. Then things got crazy, or in terms of Twitter, it's another Tuesday. Justin Fields at number 3 ahead of Patrick Mahomes. So that's where stuff went wild. Again, greatest, nicest man in America, Nathan Yankee. I would gladly talk football with him any day of the week, but this graphic set fantasy football on fire. So Jordan, your thoughts on Dynasty quarterback rankings, and I have yours pulled up from your tiers at Analytics of Dynasty, and I can tell yours do not match these.
Yeah, so I think it becomes a lot about what you value. And for me, I saw those rankings, and my initial question was, are they super flex rankings or are they one quarterback rankings? That was my initial question. Because I think the game's a little bit different.
Oh, I'm interested in this, by the way. I don't think I've ever heard that before. So yeah, keep going with that, Jordan.
Because you could make an argument that Fields, right? I'll just use Justin Fields for a second, because this is how I look at these things. Justin Fields has very high-end upside in a short sample size. Okay. He could run for 1,400 yards. He can do all of these things. The problem with him long-term is if he doesn't throw better than Josh Rosen, he's going to be he's not going to succeed long-term in the NFL, right? You cannot, as a starting quarterback in the NFL, you have to throw. Okay. And what you see from these guys consistently is you can run it first, but that's is sustaining you until you can learn to throw at a high level. We've seen that with Jalen Hurts. We've seen that with Josh Allen. Okay. He has not taken the progression steps that either of those two guys have had. And by the way, I had Justin Fields as my quarterback 1 in that class. So I'm not ragging on Justin Fields, but he has gone to a spot where he hasn't developed as a passer. Now, this is a huge year for him. We go into underlying metrics and the stuff about why I'm a little bit more questionable about it. He takes too many sacks, right? All that sort of stuff. But he needs to develop as a passer, okay? Because if you cannot sustain just as a runner. In start 1, you could say, hey, listen, if he runs and throws, maybe he has the highest ceiling. I don't agree with that, but I could understand the argument. However, in Superflex, what you're guarding against is taking a huge loss, right? Because in start 1, you're just trying to gain a huge edge over like the top 12 guys. And then, all the guys around 10 through 20 becomes pretty condensed, and it's not that different. But what you're trying to do is the replacement level is a lot, it's a lot closer, right? The problem is when you miss there, right, you're not, the replacement you're getting, let's assume it's quarterback 18, isn't that far, right? The problem is in Superflex, right, if you bust on Justin Fields and you've taken him at quarterback 2, right, the replacement that you're getting isn't anywhere near what he is. Okay. So it becomes a huge gap. And so in Superflex, what happens is you have to be very cautious about the floor. So you can't miss early. You cannot miss, because if you miss early, you're putting yourself way behind. And so in that case, I can't do them in the top 10 or top 8, I guess. I mean, there becomes a point right around there where there's not, like, it's either him or Daniel Jones, right? Like, it becomes right around in that tier. Like, but I mean, anything that doesn't have Mahomes, Allen 1 or 2, like I would love a little bit more explanation on the process.
It's kind of funny how even shiny new toy, I mean, I think even like some of the most like wide-eyed NFL fans probably do at some point get tired of like how people talk about Patrick Mahomes, but it's still wild that like the way people talk about Mahomes and the things Mahomes does, how somebody is always still looking for a shiny new toy. Last year, I did a startup dynasty at FFPC. They're super. It was Superflex, by the way, Jordan, and it's Best Ball Dynasty, which is the best thing in the world. I had the number 2 pick. Josh Allen went 1. I took Mahomes. And I even had guys on staff who were like, whoa, why didn't you take Herbert? I'm like, I don't know. Because it was Patrick Mahomes? Like, like we're always looking, and look, Justin Herbert's a better player than Justin Fields, but we're always looking for like that shiny new toy. And I don't know, I'm pretty happy with that pick of Patrick Mahomes at number 2 overall at this point. It's that was insane to me.
Yes.
What I have a question though for you, Jordan, is Hurts at 1. How do you feel about that? Because that is obviously a lot less of a hot take now than Fields at 3. But if you did that last year, say you put Hurts 3 last year, you're probably getting a lot of the same blowback that the Justin Fields ranking got this year. So I kind of want to ask about that, because how do you feel about Jalen Hurts as a number 1 quarterback in Dynasty?
So I think it, and I'm not saying that you're doing this, but people do, and I just want to hit this as a fine point. It is disrespectful to Jalen Hurts to say that Justin Fields is the next coming, because because Jalen Hurts had progressed as a passer, Josh Allen had progressed as a passer. They took massive leaps, but they had both progressed as passers. Justin Fields regressed from year 1 to year 2. Okay, he regressed, and I get that there was concerns and stuff about his supporting cast and all of that, but the stuff that he can control, he got worse at. So, like, I just want to say, like, I think Jalen, I don't think he's an heir apparent to that trajectory. So that's one. The other thing, like, I would say is, like, I don't know. I think Patrick Mahomes has got as good of argument as probably anyone to be the best quarterback in the history of the NFL by the time his career's done. Right. I think I put him on that level. Right. Let's take him number 1. Right. Like, that would be my, like, I don't think you err doing that. Right. Again, like, it's such a high floor. It's such a high ceiling. I get the temptation to want to do it because it's March and it gets boring, right? I tend to, but like in December, right? You never really, like, he's always going to be there. You know what I mean?
You don't regret taking him.
You'll never regret taking him. And like, I go through the phase of the offseason where I spend all of my time trying to trade for him and Allen. Like, this is the phase that I'm in right now. I just did it earlier this week on Allen. Like, I'll give it anything for those guys, because it's like a basketball team that makes like 19 threes in a game. You're going to win, right? Like, it takes a ton to beat you being on the other side of that. It just takes so much. And it's a floor raising and ceiling raising thing. Like, you look at how much they go to the playoffs, like they almost never miss the playoffs because it's just such a high floor and a high ceiling. It's just such a good combination. I like Jalen Hurts too. I just want to see what his extension looks like, and then I'll have him in like the top 5.
So I want to parlay that into another question, more general, Drake. Sorry to step on your toes here.
I'm wearing slippers. It's okay.
When I play Dynasty, one of the things that I've had success with, and maybe you're completely different than me, but I almost feel like projecting the NFL more than like 3 years down the line is a complete fool's exercise.
Yeah, I agree.
Guys get hurt. Guys can retire, just be like, I'm done. Calvin Johnson at the top of his game, I'm done. We see it in the NFL more than any other sport. Do we overrate? Well, Justin Herbert's 2 years younger than Patrick Mahomes. Jalen Hurts is 4 years younger than Patrick Mahomes. Do we overrate that in Dynasty fantasy football?
I think that the place where you should spend time projecting long-term is quarterback, because like there's the most consistently true thing in football is elite quarterbacks tend to stay elite for a really long time, right? We've seen that this century. Like, the guys that have dominated at the top of the position have dominated for a really long time. Brady, Breeze, right? Peyton Manning, right? Like, even Roethlisberger, Rivers, like those guys, right? Once you sort of get to that level, you tend to stay at that level within a pretty narrow range of outcomes. But once you get up there, you tend to stay there. So when you get the opportunity to get those guys that sort of get to that elite, top 5, 8 level, like, that's just a different, right? That's a very, very long-term bet. I mean, you look, like, one of the things I love to look at is, you look at quarterbacks and you sort of see how many times they've hit. right? And like Justin Herbert has hit 3 times in his career for top 20 for top 12 seasonal finishes. He's 3 for 3. The comps for him are Watson and Allen. So already you're like, wow, it's really good. Yes. 90% of time, a first round quarterback has gotten to 3 hits in his career. He's gotten to 4. Right. Like those and it just sort of stays up there. Right. Like that's the same kind of rate that they have to repeat for a while. Right. It's 80-90% of those guys hit again. And so like that becomes like a really good long-term bet. But that's like 8 quarterbacks. Right. Like that's not very many guys. And then outside of like a handful of receivers, and I mean like even like there's 2 really, Jefferson and Chase, that I feel great long-term about. But outside of that, like playing much more than like a 2 or 3 year window, like it's a really rough bet. It is a really rough bet. And so like, that's why, playing for the future, when people do that, and I'm like, go ahead, because I mean, I do this, I spend a lot of time doing this, and the more time I spend doing it, the less I feel comfortable predicting stuff. Right. And because I think that's what the numbers would tell you. And so I just like, hey, right now, like I'll give you a great example. When you see like underdog ADP, and I think a great solution to Dynasty is you look at underdog ADP, you look at other best ball sites, FFPC, you look at all these other the underdog stuff. When that is different than the Dynasty rankings, right? So when you have 2 guys that aren't maybe in the top like 5 or so of the position, right? Because there's some reasons why that they might be a little bit different. But when you start getting down to it and you start looking at 2 guys, and one's going way ahead in best ball or in redraft, they're going way ahead than another guy in Dynasty, but they're either close in value, or the guy that's even projected worse this year is going ahead of the guy that's projected. There's someone higher in Dynasty than they are in redraft. You got to be very skeptical of that, because what are you projecting for? You know what I mean? So I see that as a really good arbitrage opportunity. Especially at running back, right? Especially at running back. And so that's kind of my take on it. I do think it's way too long, and I think like you can really optimize stuff in year that gives you a chance, and and you can do that. You can arbitrage those types of things and get free picks in the future. Like it's a great strategy.
Well, let's take this a step further. I've got a couple of players on the tip of my tongue that I want to run past you gentlemen, and let's chop it up about these guys and where we see them for Dynasty. And the first name I'm going to bring up is someone who's been in the news of late, and it's Trey Lance. He's coming off the injury. The 49ers are going to have a battle on their hands between Lance and Brock Purdy and even Sam Darnold. Now, if the 49ers decide on Purdy, you would assume that Lance could be had to try to recoup some value from what they spent on him a few years ago. So let me start with you, Jordan. What is Trey Lance's value in Dynasty, and what are you doing if you got Trey Lance on your roster?
Trading him before the end of the show. That's what I'm doing. I'm going to ask you guys to pause this, and I'll be back in 10 minutes. I'll be back out to make a trade. That's what I'd be doing. I mean, with almost like running out like one of those billboards on the side of the road, in their press conferences, John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have all but said, we are just openly flirting with starting Brock Purdy, right? I don't want that person, I don't want Trey Lance when that's happening to Trey Lance. I don't want him anywhere near being a top 50 asset on my team, right? Like get out now, and I'm good, right? He has thrown 420 attempts since 2017. Okay, 420 of them. I mean, and his team, who is going to see a lot more of him than we have seen, is like openly sort of moving on. I'm firmly. They brought in Darnold. I don't think that was an accident, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that was hey, if we trade, it gives them optionality, which is exactly what it did and exactly what it looks like they were doing.
All the videos now. Look at Trey Lance throwing the football. Oh, he looks great. He's so healthy now. Please, someone come get this guy.
Right. That was actually packaged by the marketing department. Like,
let me offer a little pushback though. Like,
okay.
And I'm talking from somebody who in a dynasty league.
Yeah.
My 3 quarterbacks are Mahomes at Superflex. Mahomes, yay. Mac Jones, Jimmy Garoppolo.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'm like, we don't know Trey Lance is good. But do we know he sucks? The 49ers probably have a better idea than we do, granted. But, like, I don't know. I feel like NFL teams have talked them into way worse than trying to trade for a Trey Lance and see what they can get out of him. Like, I don't know. Jordan, what would be too little for you to sell Trey Lance? That's my question because, man, I don't know. I feel like he's going to get a shot somewhere.
Here's a third-round rookie pick.
He's a number 3 pick who's made like 4 starts in the NFL.
Right.
Like, I mean, somebody's going to give him a shot.
I mean, Darnold was atrocious through 3 years, and Carolina traded like multiple day 2 picks.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Like literally had been the worst quarterback in the league, like to start.
And we all knew that was a bad trade by Carolina, by the way.
Yeah, right. And then remember, he ran for like 3 touchdowns in like the first like 4 games, and everyone was like,
Sam
"Oh
Darnold,
my
yeah.
god,
he's back!"
Yeah, and it turned out not to be true. I mean, like we track startup ADP on my website. In the past month, he's been quarterback 14. It's interesting. Daniel Jones is ahead of him. And behind him, right, you start looking at guys behind him and you start thinking like, all right, who belongs sort of up? I mean, it's Kirk Cousins territory, Jared Goff, Derek Carr, right? Like in your question, like the question I would ask you is, I think that decision is dependent on A, format, and B, where he lies. Okay. Because if that's a start 1 league with Patrick Mahomes as your quarterback, you want to take a swing on Trey Lance.
Sure.
Right. The only way that he has value to you is if he's a home run. Right. And you're never going to get that. Again, I am a Jared Goff fan. Jared Goff's not going to do that for you. Okay. If he's your quarterback 2 in Dynasty, all right, we should be looking for a guy that can either you want to go up and get into the Prescott Watson business somewhere sort of in that range, or I think pivot to a guy like Goff, who I have more confidence in, can be a multi-year starter, who can play, like have a lot more confidence in him, then I can try and find ceiling someplace else, right? If I have 2 elite quarterbacks, right, I'm fine with Lance as my 3, right? I think a lot of, we could sort of order players, but I think the way that you feel comfortable about players is a lot about how they fit on your team, what you're trying to accomplish. And Lance, right, if he's your quarterback 2 in Superflex, I don't feel good. If he's my quarterback 3 behind Allen and Mahomes, like, all right, like now I got a fighting chance because you know what? If he can play, now I've got an elite opportunity to make a deal on him to really, really help my team, right? So I think it's very much context dependent on how comfortable you're going to feel with him. And I hope that answers your question.
It does, by the way. I think it's incredibly. I can't believe I never thought of Superflex that way before, but I mean, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Well,
and like in start 1, Goff's like Goff. Yeah, again, I am a Jared Goff fan. He's not going to do much for you in terms of elevating, your team. But if he's your quarterback 2 in Superflex, right, you feel really good because historically first round guys who have landed in the NFL and have been successful early, right, and he has been successful even though the ceiling has been super high. Those guys tend to start for a really long time. So like that's a good floor bet, right? So again, maybe you don't necessarily want him. He's not your ideal quarterback 2. You want someone with a higher ceiling, but he will suffice while you figure that out. Whereas you don't know what you're getting out of Trey Lance. You're hoping that you're getting that. You know what I mean? Like, where I think his median's probably lower, if that makes sense.
Real life NFL take. You mentioned the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. I think Detroit would be a slam dunk spot to go trade for Trey Lance. Get him into your system, see what he can do. Trey Lance this year makes $3 million. And then his base next year is $5 million. And then if he performs, you can pick up his 2025 fifth-year option. Is Jared Goff going to be your long-term option? Probably not. But, maybe you can get Trey Lance for a third-round pick. You throw that to the 49ers. Who knows? Let me ask
I thought you were going to say, I thought you were going Anthony Richardson on that take. I hadn't heard that one. I like that. I like that move. I like that.
Let's go. I should be a GM. I'm very good at predicting these wacky trades. I do it all the time. How about someone, speaking of wacky trades that could go down, Lamar Jackson? I always like striking while the iron is hot on these sort of uncertain times, and he's going to give you great things with his legs. He's an MVP. We don't question Lamar Jackson as a player, but our owners of Lamar Jackson may be a little skittish right now, and instead of valuing him as a top 5 option at the quarterback position, maybe they're like, okay, I don't know where he's going to be. What if he gets traded? Who knows, some dumpster fire team. I'd be all about trying to acquire Lamar Jackson right now.
Totally. Yeah. Yes. Right. I think you buy in the face of fear, right? Like you buy when everyone else is scared, right? It's like a fire, right? If everyone else is running away,
great
from the
Bob
building,
Harris line says that.
Right. There's a good opportunity. There's probably value running in, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan. Like, just look at the couple of recent trades: Brock Purdy 112 and a future first. I mean, that's a super flex trade. Like, that's outright panic, right? 102 Terrace Marshall and Laviska Shenault, outright panic. 104 and Geno Smith, again, outright panic.
There was a trade that involved Laviska Shenault in 2023.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like, what are you doing? Like, so yes, I'd
rather have the roster spot. like just an empty roster spot than Laviska Shenault.
Right. It's like one of those trades in the NBA where they trade for a guy and then cut him. Right. Like, you have to trade for the salary.
Just he was a salary match. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah. So, I mean, I like to run in that direction. And again, I am always in the business of, like, I legitimately spend this time of year in Dynasty, especially in Superflex, like how can I get elite quarterbacks? Right. And so this is a good opportunity on Lamar Jackson. Right. Like, and again, even when there's a dip, right. There was a dip with Deshaun Watson. Everyone hated him, justifiably so for what he was accused of doing. He fell to round 4, round 5, round 6 at different points, right? I got him for basically the equivalent of Mac Jones in multiple different leagues during that rookie class. You want to know what? 202 in the last month, right? I mean, and he was terrible last year, right? That's the rebound, right? So these guys tend to rebound because there's a shortage of them. So anytime you get a chance to buy one of them low that has done it, right? Lamar Jackson's a good example of that.
We switch gears to the running back position, and someone at fantasypoints.com in our dynasty rankings, we have it the 16th overall running back. It's Derrick Henry. He's 29 years old. This is the final year of his Titans deal. He's coming off a season, though, guys, where he ran for 1,500 plus yards, 13 touchdowns. This team looks really bad, though, and he's likely on the move after this season. People think Derrick Henry's 200 years old right now, but he's still producing. And you're in this win now mode. So I think somebody who has Derrick Henry might be in the mindset of, I'm trying to move off of him, but a contending team might try to say, Derrick Henry's the piece I need to get me that championship. What do you think of King Henry?
I would just be careful. The one thing I'd be a little cautious of with Derrick Henry is, do you want to make the investment right now? Right. Because again, if you look at some of the stuff for him, like later first, right, is some, mid first, depending on sort of what the trade looks like. The question that I would have with that is, you're very much sort of in on this year if you do that. And I'm not saying like 110 for Derrick Henry, like it's probably Derrick Henry's probably the right choice, but just keep in mind that you don't necessarily know if the trajectory of your team in August when you do that deal right now. Right? You don't know what your team's going to look like in October. So just sort of be careful when you're saying, I'm going to push all my chips in, right? If the way I always try and do these, I don't like to speculate with future assets. So if I can sort of pay for it right now, if it's rookie picks this year, and that way the check's written, it's paid for, and now Derrick Henry's on my team and I have to worry about what happens in the future, good, I'm done. Like, that's fine. I don't want to do that with future picks because, right, then I've got all that uncertainty kind of hanging over my head. And I'm out of pick, right? So that's kind of how I view those. Again, I think like later first round, like, the odds that you get someone there that's going to beat him is probably not great at any point in their career, let alone this year.
Isiah Pacheco is someone who is a 7th round draft capital last year for the Kansas City Chiefs. He ran for 830 yards, 5 touchdowns. I couldn't believe the amount of Pacheco trade offers that I had in my inbox from the guy who owned him. It seems like people They know this guy, maybe he's a flash in the pan, but he's easily replaceable. Yeah, he runs hard. Yeah, he's a great story. It's an electric offense, but do we really think 7th round pick Isiah Pacheco is going to be the running back for the next 4 years for the Kansas City Chiefs? So if someone's offering him to you, I mean, are you trying to just take a low ball approach? You're saying, I mean, anybody who's a starting running back, I'd like to have on my team, but I think I'm waiting till after the NFL draft first and foremost, because what if they add somebody in the 2nd round? You know, you never know. And now Isiah Pacheco is rendered useless.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of a difference maker he ultimately is, right? That's kind of my thought. Like, you look, there's some late 1st round valuation type deals on him. If you look out there, early 2nd round stuff, like, I don't know how he moves the needle. And if you like, I think you could draft someone there that has A, better pedigree, and B, has a more diverse skill set. I don't know if he's ever can be a 3-down guy. Right? And like, he didn't show it in the receiving aspect last year in terms of the efficiencies you're looking for. And if I can get 203, those trades are happening. Like this week, you're seeing trades like that. If I can get in that range, like, that gives me flexibility, and I would much rather do that.
Joe, did you see today Tyreek Hill said that at the end of his Miami Dolphins contract, which ends in 4 more years, he's going to retire from the NFL?
You know what? It didn't really move the needle for me.
Yeah.
Because it's 3 years down the road.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you know what? A lot of things could happen in 3 years. Maybe there's a chance he's at the top of his game. Who's going to be playing quarterback for the Miami Dolphins? I will have you guys know, though, that I did make a trade involving Tyreek Hill. One of my dynasty teams was completely out of it last year. And I dealt him away for 2 first-round picks. And I don't know, I feel pretty good about that now. Getting a couple of first-round picks for Tyreek Hill. But no, 3 years down the road does not... See, to me, that was like non-news.
Yes.
It's 3 years away, and the guy's been in the league for like 7 years. I mean, all right, so he's going to play 10, 11 years in the NFL. That's a damn good career. That was non-news to me. And as a matter of fact, if I'm a contending team, I would love to see if somebody is going to be so asinine as to panic trade him because of that.
Let me just run this guy's by you quickly. Looking at Tyreek Hill's contract right now. So he's got 23, 24, 25, and 26 that he still gets to play. His base salary in 2020, there's no way he's playing on this, is $43.9 million. And so he's got a dead cap that year of 11.3. There's 0% chance he plays 2026 on that number for the Miami Dolphins. This year he only makes 1.1. So it's a great savings for them right now. But yeah, give me a break. So really, like you said, Joe, he's got 4 years left. It's a 3-year deal. Jordan, how are you valuing Tyreek Hill, though? Still a guy at the top of his game. Is this maybe you throw something out there in your league, see if somebody is like, oh my God, Tyreek Hill's going to retire tomorrow, without really thinking longer term down the road?
Yeah, 3 years is an eternity, right? Like, just, I mean, if the player is thinking about retiring in the next presidential administration, you probably shouldn't worry too much about it, right? Like that. Just think of, we're 2 years away from that. So I wouldn't be super worried about it. Again, I think it's like, I love when people overreact because I can run towards it and get it for cheaper. That's kind of how I'd be thinking about him. If this is gonna cause this price to fall.
And the last guy we'll talk about with our pal Jordan McNamara. Again, follow him on Twitter at McNamara Dynasty. He's at FootballGuys.com, analyticsofdynasty.com. This is his season, folks. So we're so glad to have him on with us. I want to ask you about Davante Adams. Selfishly, because I have him on a team that is very good. It's that same Tom Brady-less team that we just mentioned. 30 years old, welcoming in Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. Still has 4 years left on his Las Vegas Raiders deal, coming off a season where he logged the most snaps of his entire career and saw a career high in targets. Still went over 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns. But anybody you talk to about Davante Adams, they act like, the bottom has fallen out from this guy because he's not with Aaron Rodgers and now there's no Derek Carr. I still think Davante Adams is the best receiver in football.
Yeah. I mean, he's certainly in that conversation. I mean, and he's into a spot where it's pretty reasonable too. Again, kind of what I said before about paying for guys, like pay for him now, like 107 and Samaje Perine for Adams. right? Like I dig that. You know what I mean? So those types of deals. I mean, Rashad White and George Pickens for Adams, right? Like yes, like those deals where you're not super worried about the future on those guys. You're not super worried about where that pick is going to be in 2024 if you're doing the deal. Pay for it right now, something in the mid first, right? If you can, like, you're going to be thinking about in that range in a super flex format. You're going to be thinking about wide receiver 2 or 3, maybe. You're going to be thinking about quarterback 4, maybe running back, an undersized running back somewhere like that's going to kind of be the conversation that you're going to be having in your head. Like, okay, I can solve wide receiver probably for the next couple of years and bank that. I would go. I like that, and that's something I didn't do earlier on in my career. I've leaned more and more into that as I've gotten more experienced in Dynasty.
Joe, you were shaking your head when I said that Davante Adams is the best wide receiver in football. Who do you rank over him?
Who do I rank over Davante Adams right now? Oh, I don't think I was shaking my head in particular at that, but Justin Jefferson. And now I've got fantasy brain here, so I'm like, do I rank Jamar Chase above Davante Adams? Would I say he's better? Probably not. I don't think Tyreek Hill gets the respect he deserves as being one of the best wide receivers because I don't think people view a small explosive guy. Oh, that guy can't be the best receiver in football, right? Except he went from Kansas City to Miami and put up better numbers.
I think the best weapon in football. I would say that. Tyreek Hill's.
I mean, he's a wide receiver, man. I mean, like look at the production. He's outrageous. I mean, Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson probably have the argument, but Davante Adams is right there. Again, this is like Dynasty brain taking over, though. Like, would I rather have AJ Brown in Dynasty? Yeah, of course I would. But Davante Adams is probably still better than him. So no, I don't think that's an outrageous argument to be made at all. The question is, can Jimmy Garoppolo get into football? And I think the answer is yes. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is more than capable of getting the football to him. Derek Carr, is coming off a year where the Raiders dropped him like a bad habit, and Davante Adams still put up elite numbers with him. So I think you'll be just fine with Jimmy Garoppolo quarterback.
Jordan, what can people expect if they sign up for analyticsofdynasty.com? What kind of services do you offer the good folks when they click on that site?
Yeah, so I do a daily podcast. So I think I did 360 last year, and then 388 the year before. So we average more than one a day.
Wow.
I'm still trying to figure out where I lost. I lost a couple last year, and I can't figure out where I lost.
Well, you told us you got hit by a car riding your bike, so maybe
I did, but
I
still posted it that day. I don't know where. There must have been an in-season show that I didn't do this year. I can't figure it out. I got to go back and run actual analytics on figuring out where that lost show disappeared to. But yeah, so you can find all that. My Dynasty trade database, where I pull them the trades here. I got tiers. I got my hierarchy of assets. So you can find that all at Analytics Dynasty. And honestly, if you're just looking, if you're into Dynasty, my team building guide, it'll take you through all you need to know in terms of strategy. It'll help you. Build more effective teams. And honestly, probably the thing that I'm most proud about, I've written 5 of these annual guides. This is the 5th one. And I think the thing that I'm most proud about was this year I had 2 subscribers write a chapter for me, and they were awesome, right? They were awesome in terms of, how they incorporated the stuff that we had talked about and the stuff that we learned in sort of the analytics of Dynasty. In the journey that has been the analytics of Dynasty. They did an awesome job building their teams. They did an awesome job writing it. So that's probably the stuff. I'll take credit for their writing. That's probably the stuff I felt most proud of. But yeah, you can go ahead and get that all analyticsdynasty.com, and up in the menu, just go to the store and you can get the book.
I've purchased that in the past myself. I can say I'm not, if I'm a host and I have somebody on, like yourself or Matt Waldman or somebody that has a great product out there, I like to support them. And pick those things up. This was fun. We got an hour of Dynasty talk in. Jordan McNamara, thank you so much. Be safe on your bike out there across Central New York. Joe, enjoy the rest of your evening with your lovely wife. Have a cocktail for me. Folks, this is fun. Keep hanging with us on the YouTube channel. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. And remember, we'll see you next time here on the 2 Point Stance.